Richard Dawkins, The Blind Watchmaker. Why the evidence of the evolution reveals a universe without design. Chapter 6, Origin and Miracle. Chance, luck, coincidence, miracle. One of the main topics of this chapter is a miracle and what do you mean by them. My thesis will be the events that we commonly call miracle are not supernatural but a part of a spectrum of more or less improbable natural event. A miracle, in the other word, if it occurs at all, is a tremendous stroke of luck. Events don't fall neatly into natural event plus miracles. There are some would-be events that are too improbable to be contemplated, but we can't know this until we have done a calculation. And to do the calculation, we must know how much time was available. More generally, how many opportunities were available for the event to work. Given infinity time or infinity opportunity, anything is possible. The large number of probably pointed by astronomy and the large time spans characteristics of geology combine to touch our everyday estimates of what is expected and what is miraculous. I shall build up to this point using a specific example, which is the other main theme of this chapter. This example is the problem of how life originated on Earth. To make the point clearly, I shall arbitrarily concentrate on one particular theory of the origin of life, although any one of the modern theories would have served the purpose. We can accept a certain amount of luck in our explanation, but not too much. The question is how much. The immensity of geological time entitled us to postulate more improbable coincidence that a court of law would allow, but even so, there are limits. Cumulative selection is the key to all our modern explanation to life. It strings a series of acceptably lucky events, random mutations, together in a non-random sequence so that at the end of the sequence, the finished product carries the illusion of being very, very lucky indeed, but too improbable to have come about by chance alone, even given a time span millions of times longer than the age of the universe so far. Cumulative selection is the key, but it has to get started, and we cannot escape the need to postulate a single-step chance event in the origin of cumulative selection itself. And the vital first step is a difficult one because in its heart there lies what seems to be a paradox. The replication process that we know seems to need complicated machinery to work. In the presence of a replicase machine tool, fragments of RNA will evolve repeatedly and convergently toward the same endpoint, and the endpoint whose probability seems vanishingly small until you reflect on the power of the cumulative selection. I'd have to assist this cumulative selection to get started. It won't go unless you provide a catalyst, such as the replicase machine tool of the previous chapter. And the catalyst, it seems, is unlikely to come into existence spontaneously except under the direction of other RNA molecules. DNA molecules replicate in the complicated machinery of the cell, and written word replicate in Xerox machines. but neither seem capable of spontaneously replication in the absence of their supporting machinery. A Xerox machine is capable of copying its own blueprint, but it's not capable of springing spontaneously into existence. Biometaphor readily replicate in the environment provided by a suitably written computer program, but they can't write their own program or build a computer to run it. The theory of the blind watchmaker is extremely powerful given that you are allowed to assume replication and hence cumulative selection. But if replication needs complex machinery, since the only way we know for complex machinery ultimately to come into existence is cumulative selection, we have a problem. Certainly, the modern cellular machinery, the apparatus of DNA replication and protein synthesis, have all the hallmarks of a highly evolved, especially fashioned machine. We have seen how staggeringly impressive it is as an accurate data storage device, its own level of ultra miniaturization. It's one of the same order of the elaborateness and complexity of design as the human eye, which at the grosser level. All who have given thought to the matter agree that an apparatus as complex as the human eye could not possibly come into existence through single-step selection. Unfortunately, the same seems to be true of at least part of the apparatus of cellular machinery whereby DNA replicates itself, and this applies not just to the set of the advanced creature like ourselves and amoebas, but also to relatively more primitive creatures like bacteria and blue-green algae. So, cumulative selection can manufacture complexity, while single-step selection cannot. But cumulative selection cannot work unless there is some minimal machinery of replication and replicator power. And the only machinery of replication that we know seems too complicated to have come into existence by means of anything less than many generations of cumulative selection. Some people see this as a fundamental flaw in the whole theory of the blind watchmaker. They see it as an alternative proof that there must originally have been a designer, not a blind watchmaker, but a far-sighted supernatural watchmaker. Maybe, it's argued, the creator does not control the day-to-day succession of evolutionary events. Maybe he did not frame the tiger and the lamb. Maybe he did not make a tree, but he did set up the original machinery of the replication and replicator power, the original machinery of DNA and protein, then made cumulative selection, and hence of all evolution possible. This is a transparently feeble argument. Indeed, it's obviously self-utility. Organized complexity is the thing that you are having difficulty in explaining. Once you are allowed simply to postulate organized complexity, if only the organized complexity of the DNA protein replicating engine, it's relatively easy to invoke it as a generator of yet more organized complexity. That, indeed, is what most of this book is about. But of course, any God capable of intelligently designing something as complex as the DNA protein replicating machine must have been at least as complex and organized as the machine itself. Far more so if we suppose him additionally capable of such advanced functions as listening to prayers and forgiving sins. To explain the origin of the DNA protein machine, by invoking a supernatural designer is to explain precisely nothing, for it leaves unexplained the origin of the designer. You have to say something like, God was always there, and if you allow yourself that kind of lazy way out, you might as well just say, DNA was always there, or life was always there, and be done with it. The more we can get away from miracle, the major improbability, fantastic coincidence, large chance event, and the most slowly we can break large chance events up into a cumulative series of small chance events, the more satisfying to rational minds our explanation will be. But in this chapter, we are asking how improbable, how miraculous a single event you are allowed to postulate. What's the largest single event of the sheer naked coincidence, sheer unadulterated miraculous luck, and we are allowed to get away with in our series? It still says that we have a satisfactory explanation of life. In order to a monkey to write, me thinks it is like a weasel. By chance, we need a very large amount of luck, but it's still measurable. We calculate the edge against it at about 10,000 billion to 1 against. Nobody can really comprehend or imagine such a large number when you just think of this degree of improbability as synonymous with impossible. But although we can't comprehend this level of improbability in our mind, we shouldn't just run away from them in terror. The number 10^44 may be very large, but you can still write it down, and you can still use it in calculation. There are, after all, even large number 10^46 power, for instance. It's not just large. You need to add 10^44 to itself 1,000,000 times in order to obtain 10^46 power. But if we could somehow muster a gang of 10^46 power monkeys, which with each one typewriter, why, lo and behold, one of them would solemnly type these things is like a weasel, and another would almost certainly type, I think therefore I am. The problem is, of course, that you couldn't assemble that many monkeys. If all the matter in the universe were turned into monkey flesh, you still couldn't get enough monkeys. The miracle of a monkey type, me thinks it is like a weasel, is quantitatively too great, measurably too great for us to admit to our series about what actually happens. But he couldn't know this until we sat down and did the calculation. So, there are some level of sheer luck, not only too great to furnish human imagination, but too great to be allowed in our hard-headed calculation about the origin of life. But, to repeat the question, how great a level of luck, how much of a miracle are you allowed to postulate? Don't run away from this question just because right numbers are involved. It's a perfectly valid question, and we can at least read them down what you would need to know in order to calculate the answer. Now, here is a fascinating thought. The answer to our question of how much luck you are allowed to postulate depends upon whether our planet, the only one that has life, or whether life abound all around the universe. The one thing we know for certain is that life has arisen once, here at this very planet, but we have no idea at all whether there is life anywhere else in the universe. It's entirely possible that there isn't. Some people have calculated that there must be life elsewhere on the following ground. I won't point out the fallacy until afterward. There are probably at least 10, 24, i.e. 100 billion roughly suitable planets in the universe. We know that life has arisen here, so it can't be all that improbable. Therefore, it's almost inescapable that at least some among all these billions of other planets have life. The flaw in the argument lies in the inference that because life has arisen here, it can't be too terribly improbable. We will notice that this inference contains the built-in assumption that whatever went on Earth is likely to have gone to elsewhere in the universe. And this begs the whole question. In other words, the kind of a statistical argument that there must be life elsewhere in the universe because there is life here built in as an assumption. But it is setting out to prove. This doesn't mean that the conclusion that life exists all around the universe is necessarily wrong. My guess is that it's probably right. It simply means that the particular argument that leads up to it is no argument at all. It's just an assumption. Let us, for the sake of discussion, entertain the alternative assumption that life has arisen only once, and that was here on Earth. It's tempting to object to this assumption on the following emotional grounds. Isn't there something terribly medieval about it? Doesn't it recall the time when the church taught that our Earth was the center of the universe, and the stars just little pinpricks of light set the sky for our delight? Or even more observable assumptions that the stars go out their way to exert astrological influence on our little lives? How many concede to assumption that out of all of the billions of planets in the universe, our own little backwater of the world, in our own local backwater of the solar system, in our own local backwater of the galaxy, should have been singled out for life? Why, for goodness sake, should it have been our planet? I am genuinely sorry, for I am heartily thankful that we have escaped from the small-mindedness of the medieval church, and I despite modern astrology, but I am afraid that the rhetoric about the backward in the previous paragraph just empty rhetoric. It's entirely possible that our backwater of the planet is literally the only one that has ever gone alive. The point is that if there were only one planet that has ever been born alive, then it would have to be our planet. For the very good reason that we are here discussing the question. If the origin of life is the church's improbable event that's happening on our only planet in the universe, then our planet has to be that planet. So you can't use the fact that Earth has life to conclude that life must be possible enough to have arisen on another planet. Such an argument would be circular. You have to have some independent argument about how easy or difficult it is for life to originate on a planet before we can even begin to answer the question of how many there other planets in the universe have life. But that isn't the question you said out there. Our question was, how much luck are we allowed to assume in a theory of the origin of life on Earth? I said that the answer depends upon whether life has arisen only once or many times. Begin by giving a name to the probability, however low it is. The life will originate on any randomly designed planet of some particular type. Call this number the spontaneous generation probability, or SGP. Which is the SGP that we shall arrive at if we sit down with our chemistry textbook or strike sparks through palpable mixture of atmospheric gas in our laboratory and calculate the odds of replicating molecular springing spontaneously into existence in a typical planetary atmosphere. Suppose that our best guess of the SGP is some very small number, say 1 in a billion. This is obviously such a small probability that we haven't the faintest hope to duplicating such a fantastically lucky, miraculous event as the origin of life in our laboratory experiment. Yet, if we assume, as you are perfectly entitled to for the sake of the argument, that life has originated only once in the universe, it follows that we are allowed to postulate a very large amount of log in the theory, because there are so many planets in the universe. Your life could have originated. If, as one estimate has, there are 100 billion planets, there is 100 billion times greater than even the very low SGP that we postulate. To conclude this argument, the maximum amount of log that you are allowed to assume before you reject a particular theory of the origin of life has odd of 1 in n, where n is the number of suitable planets in the universe. There is a lot hidden in that word suitable, but let us put an upper limit of 1 in 100 billion for the maximum amount of log that this argument entitles us to assume.